My name is Dorothy Fisher. I'm 33 years old, and for a long time, I truly believed I was living the life I was meant to have. 6 years ago, I was engaged to Nicole. She was 28 then, vibrant, confident, and endlessly charming when she wanted to be. We had been together for 5 years, and during that time, I built my future around her without hesitation. I imagined the house we'd grow old in, the traditions we'd create, the quiet mornings that would someday replace our chaotic ones. I thought that kind of certainty was love. Now I know better. Nicole had a way of filling every room she entered, not just with energy, but with gravity. Everything bent toward her. Conversations, plans, emotions. If something wasn't about her, she found a way to make it so. I didn't recognize it as a problem back then. I called it confidence. I called it passion. I told myself that strong women took up space, and that loving one meant learning to orbit around her. There were signs, so many signs. When I got promoted after working overtime for nearly a year, Nicole congratulated me for exactly 30 seconds before launching into a monologue about how her own boss didn't appreciate her talent. At my mother's birthday dinner, she arrived late wearing a dramatic dress that immediately drew attention, then redirected the conversation toward her stressful week and how no one ever supported her enough. Each time I swallowed the discomfort. I told myself relationships weren't about tallying sacrifices. Love meant acceptance. Love meant patience. When we started planning our wedding, Nicole took control immediately. She chose the venue, the colors, the guest list priorities, even the cake flavor. I barely had input, but I convinced myself that was fine. She seemed so invested, so driven. I thought letting her lead was easier than fighting for space she didn't think I needed. "It's our wedding," she'd say with a smile that somehow shut the conversation down. "You'll see. It'll be perfect." And honestly, it was, at least on the surface. The morning of the wedding, everything looked exactly like Nicole had envisioned. Soft lighting, perfectly coordinated florals, guests smiling, murmuring, waiting. My family hugged me, my friends reassured me, and I stood there feeling nervous but hopeful. This was it, the finish line, the moment all the compromises would finally make sense. When the music began and the wedding party started down the aisle, my heart raced. I couldn't stop smiling. I was ready to see Nicole, ready to lock eyes with her and know we'd made it. Then the music stopped. At first, I didn't panic. I assumed there was a delay. A last-minute dress issue, a missing accessory. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The air shifted. I could feel it before I heard it. The whispers, the chairs creaking as people leaned forward. My maid of honor caught my eye. Her expression wasn't confused. It was worried. A moment later, one of Nicole's bridesmaids approached me. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She held out a folded piece of paper without meeting my eyes. I took it. Inside were just a few words, written hastily, like they'd been an afterthought. "I can't do this. I need to figure myself out. I'm sorry." That was it. No explanation, no conversation, no goodbye. I remember the sound my own heartbeat made in my ears. I remember the way the room seemed too bright, too quiet, too full of people suddenly staring at me. I stood there, frozen, holding a note that had just dismantled 5 years of my life. Eventually, someone asked what was going on. I had to turn around and tell them Nicole wasn't coming. The pity on their faces was unbearable. It felt like standing naked under fluorescent lights, exposed and powerless. I hated the way people avoided my eyes. I hated how small I felt in a room that moments ago had felt like home. Nicole didn't call. She didn't text. She vanished. The rest of the day blurred together in logistics and apologies. I canceled vendors. I reassured guests. I made excuses for a woman who couldn't even face me. I told people she was overwhelmed, that she needed time. I was still protecting her because admitting the truth felt worse. Weeks later, I found out what she had actually been doing. Nicole hadn't been finding herself. She had been seeing another man, someone she met on a work trip 3 months before our wedding. She'd been going back and forth between us, weighing her options like I was a choice on a menu. The wedding day had forced her to decide. She chose him. That revelation didn't just break my heart. It rewired it. I replayed every moment of our relationship, wondering how I missed it, how many times I'd ignored my own instincts just to keep the peace, how often I'd shrunk myself so she could feel bigger. As humiliating as that day was, it forced me to confront something I'd avoided for years. I had been settling. I'd mistaken self-erasure for devotion. I'd believed that love meant endurance instead of reciprocity. Being left at the altar wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to me. Spending a lifetime with someone who never truly saw me would have been worse. That day shattered me, but it also set me free. I didn't know it yet, but the life I was about to build would demand strength I didn't realize I had. Why? And Nicole? She wasn't done with me. Not even close. It took me a long time to stop flinching at the sound of my own name. After Nicole disappeared, people tried to comfort me in the ways people always do after public heartbreak. They brought casseroles, sent awkward texts, told me I'd dodged a bullet. And maybe I had, but bullets still leave bruises even when they miss your heart. The first few months were survival. I went through the motions at work like a ghost, in business, casual. I smiled when people spoke to me, laughed when the timing demanded it, and then went home and sat in silence because the quiet felt safer than pretending I was fine. At night, I replayed the wedding in my head like a punishment. The music stopping, the whispers, that folded piece of paper. Sometimes the shame hit me so hard I'd physically sit up in bed, heart pounding, like I could outrun it. And the worst part? A sliver of me still tried to protect Nicole even in my own mind. Maybe she panicked. Maybe she was scared. Maybe I missed something. Therapy was the first time I said the truth out loud. She chose humiliation over honesty. My therapist didn't call her evil. She didn't label Nicole a monster. She just asked me, gently, why I believed love meant tolerating disrespect. Why I measured my worth by how much I could endure. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was the beginning of a different kind of strength. Quiet, unglamorous, built one truthful sentence at a time. I threw myself into work, partly because I needed structure, partly because I didn't trust my mind when it had too much room to wander. I started saying no to things I didn't want. I stopped explaining my boundaries like they needed permission to exist. I learned how to be alone without feeling like I was being punished. Dating wasn't even on my radar for a long time. I didn't want someone new. I didn't want vulnerability. I didn't want to hand anyone else the power to knock the air out of my lungs with a single decision. Then my friend Eric invited me to a backyard barbecue. I almost didn't go. It felt ridiculous to show up somewhere cheerful when my inside still felt like aftermath. But Eric was persistent, and something in me, some stubborn little spark, whispered that I couldn't keep hiding forever. So I went, telling myself I'd stay for 1 hour and leave the moment I felt overwhelmed. That's where I met Grace. She wasn't the loudest person in the yard. She wasn't trying to perform. She was sitting at a picnic table with a little boy who had just spilled his drink all over himself. Everyone else laughed. Not cruelly, more like that instinctive kids are chaos kind of laugh. But Grace didn't join in. She grabbed napkins, crouched down, and joked with him in this calm, warm way that made him stop looking like he wanted to cry. I watched her for a moment too long, and something in my chest tightened. Not with fear, but with recognition. Realness. When I finally walked over, I didn't have a smooth line. I didn't have game. I had awkward small talk and nervous energy. Grace didn't make me feel stupid for it. She smiled, asked my name, and actually listened to the answer like it mattered. We talked for the rest of the afternoon, about nothing and everything. Favorite movies, pet peeves, the weirdest jobs we'd ever had. Her laugh wasn't flashy. It was soft and genuine, like she didn't need an audience to enjoy herself. Our first date wasn't some cinematic romance scene. It was dinner at a small diner near her place, one of those hole-in-the-wall spots with mismatched chairs and a waitress who calls everyone Arne. We sat there for hours, and at some point I realized something that startled me. I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to earn her approval or manage her moods. I was just me. Grace had her own life, her own friends, her own goals. She didn't need me to be her entire world, and she didn't try to become mine. That alone felt like breathing after years underwater. And because my life has a cruel sense of timing, that's when Lisa entered the picture. Lisa was someone I'd known for years through mutual friends. We weren't close, but we ran in the same circles. She was the kind of woman who seemed to know everyone, the kind who always had updates and opinions, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Lisa also happened to know Nicole. At first, I didn't think much of it. Ohio isn't huge. People overlap. I told Grace about Nicole early on. Not the gory details, but enough that she understood my hesitation about love. Grace didn't pry. She didn't treat my past like gossip. She just said, "I'm sorry that happened to you, and let me move at my own pace." Lisa, on the other hand, seemed fascinated. It started small, a comment here, a question there. It's kind of wild, she said once, swirling her drink at a group dinner, how different Grace is from Nicole. Another time, she asked, too casually, do you ever think about what went wrong with Nicole? Like, do you think you'll ever get closure? Every time I shut it down. Lisa, I'm not interested in talking about Nicole, I'd say, keeping my tone calm. She'd laugh like I was overreacting. I'm just making conversation. But the questions didn't stop. Then Grace told me something that put a cold weight in my stomach. She asked me about you, Grace said one night, when we were cleaning up after dinner at my place. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were watchful. Like, a lot. What kind of questions? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. Grace hesitated, then shrugged like she didn't want to give it too much power. How you are in relationships, if you talk about Nicole, if you seem over it, stuff like that. I froze with a plate in my hands. That's weird, I said carefully. Grace nodded. It's not just curiosity, Dorothy. It felt like she was collecting information. That sentence landed like a warning bell. Not long after, Lisa hosted a small dinner party. Grace and I went together, and the entire night felt like sitting in a room where the temperature kept dropping. Lisa brought up Nicole like she was a shared memory everyone should celebrate. Remember when you and Nicole planned that charity event? She said loudly, smiling like she was telling a funny story. You two were such a great team. My jaw tightened. Grace didn't flinch. She kept her expression polite, even warm. But I noticed the way her fingers curled tighter around her glass. The way she leaned a fraction closer to me. Not clingy, just steady, like a quiet reminder that we were in this together. On the drive home, Grace finally exhaled. I don't trust her, she said simply. I kept my eyes on the road, but my hands were gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. Lisa? Grace nodded. She doesn't feel on our side. I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to believe Lisa was just socially clueless. But something in me, the part of me that had ignored red flags before, refused to go back to sleep. So I started paying attention. Lisa's innocent comments kept coming. You know, she said once, leaning in like she was sharing a secret. Nicole really regrets how things ended. She's changed a lot. I stared at her. Why are you telling me that? Lisa blinked, all fake surprise. Because I care about you. But it didn't feel like care. It felt like a test, like she was trying to plant a seed. Finally, I pulled her aside after one of our group hangouts, away from the noise and laughter. Lisa, I said, keeping my voice low, I don't know what you're trying to do, but Nicole is my past. Grace is my future. If you can't respect that, we're not going to have much of a friendship moving forward. Lisa's face shifted, just for a split second, before she put the smile back on. Dorothy, you're being dramatic, she said. I'm just looking out for you. Then stop, I said, because you're making Grace uncomfortable, and you're making me suspicious. Lisa lifted her hands like I was accusing her of a crime. Wow, okay, message received. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. I wanted to believe that setting a boundary would make her back off the way normal people do. But Lisa didn't back off. She hovered more, watched more, asked more questions, always phrased like concern, always delivered like curiosity with teeth. And here's the thing I didn't connect yet. Lisa wasn't just being weird. She was reporting. At the time, I couldn't prove it. I couldn't even fully articulate why I felt uneasy. I only knew Grace was right. There was something calculated about the way Lisa inserted Nicole into conversations, like she was trying to keep her alive. Then, Grace and I announced our engagement. It was small, just close friends, a few family members, a quiet celebration that felt safe. I thought keeping it intimate would protect it. I thought if we didn't make a spectacle, nothing could reach us. But that night, Grace pulled me aside, her expression tight. Lisa cornered me, she whispered. She asked if you still talk about Nicole, how much you told me, whether I ever worry you're not really over her. My stomach sank. That was the moment something in me hardened, not into bitterness, into clarity. I told Lisa directly, without softening it, back off. I didn't block her. I didn't start a public feud. I just created distance so clean and obvious she couldn't pretend not to notice. And for a brief moment, life felt normal again. Grace and I planned our wedding. We booked the venue, tasted cakes, argued over seating charts in the most ordinary, loving way. We laughed more than we fought. We built routines that felt like home. For the first time in years, I let myself believe in joy without waiting for it to be taken away. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, Nicole reappeared. Not in my life, in my inbox. And the moment I saw her name, my entire body remembered what my mind had been trying to forget. Seeing Nicole's name in my inbox felt like being yanked backward in time. For a full minute, I just stared at the screen. My chest tightened, my palms went cold, and my first instinct was pure, irrational panic, like she still had the power to upend my life with a single word. I hated that reaction. I hated that my body remembered her even when my mind knew better. I should have deleted the email immediately. Instead, I opened it. It was long, dramatic, apologetic in that way that sounded emotional without actually taking responsibility. Nicole wrote about how leaving me had been the biggest mistake of her life, how she'd lost herself back then, how she'd changed, how she thought about me all the time. She said she needed closure. She begged me to talk to her, just once. 2 weeks before my wedding. I didn't respond. I didn't owe her forgiveness or conversation or emotional labor. I closed the email, deleted it, and told myself that was the end of it. I was wrong. A few days later, Grace and I hosted a small pre-wedding get-together at her parents' house. Nothing fancy, just close friends, family, food on long tables, fairy lights strung across the backyard. It felt warm, safe, like a pause before the chaos of the big day. I didn't know that safety had already been breached. About halfway through the night, I heard someone say, "Wait, is that Nicole?" My stomach dropped so hard it felt like I might actually fall. I turned around. She was walking up the driveway like she belonged there, heels clicking, black dress hugging her frame, hair styled perfectly. She didn't look like someone stopping by out of desperation. She looked like she was making an entrance. My first thought was, how did she know about this? My second was Lisa. Grace stepped closer to me instinctively, her hand brushing mine. I could feel the tension radiating off her, even though her face stayed calm. "Dorothy," Nicole said brightly, like we were old friends running into each other at the grocery store. "It's so good to see you." I didn't answer. She didn't seem to notice, or didn't care. She launched into a speech about how she'd been thinking about me nonstop, about how she wanted to make things right, about how she knew we were meant to be. "Nicole," I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could, "you shouldn't be here." She ignored me. She cried. She apologized. She talked about fate, about love, about how leaving me had been a mistake she'd regret forever. It was surreal, like she thought she was the main character in a movie where persistence equals romance. Grace finally stepped forward. "You need to leave," she said calmly. "This is our celebration. You weren't invited." Nicole looked at her like Grace was an obstacle, not a person. Like Grace was the problem standing between her and something she believed still belonged to her. "You don't understand," Nicole snapped. "Dorothy and I have history. This isn't about you." That was it. "This is exactly about Grace," I said sharply. "She's my fiancé. I love her. You don't get to rewrite my life because you regret your choices." For a moment, Nicole just stared at me, like she was trying to recalibrate a reality where she didn't get what she wanted. Then she threw one last line over her shoulder as she stormed off. "You're going to regret this." The rest of the night was strange. Grace's parents were supportive, reassuring us it wasn't our fault. People tried to lighten the mood, but I could feel the tension under everything, like a low hum. Later that night, Grace didn't say much. She didn't need to. The next morning, I called Lisa. I didn't ease into it. I didn't soften my tone. "Did you tell Nicole about the party?" There was a pause. Too long. "I might have mentioned it," she said defensively. "I just thought she deserved to know what was going on." My hands shook with anger. "Why would you think that was okay?" I snapped. "You know what she did to me. You know I'm marrying Grace." "She's my friend too, Dorothy," Lisa shot back. "She's been struggling." "You don't get to decide that for me," I said. "You've been stirring the pot for months, and I'm done. Stay out of my relationship." I hung up before she could respond. That should have been enough. It wasn't. That night, I started getting texts from an unknown number. "I can't stop thinking about you. Do you ever wonder what could have been?" I blocked the number. Then the messages came from social media. New accounts, different usernames, same tone, same obsession. Grace and I talked about it late into the night. We decided to focus on the wedding. We told ourselves we wouldn't let Nicole steal this moment from us. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't finished. 2 weeks before the wedding, everything should have been excitement and anticipation. Instead, it felt like waiting for a storm. We hired extra security. We warned the venue staff. We prepared for the worst, hoping it wouldn't come. The day of the wedding arrived, and for a while, everything was perfect. The venue was beautiful. The sunlight filtered through the trees just right. Our families smiled. Grace looked stunning, grounded, calm, radiant. As she walked down the aisle, I felt something settle in my chest, a certainty I'd never had before. Then, halfway through the ceremony, I heard a commotion at the back. I tried to ignore it. Then I heard her voice. "Dorothy!" I turned. Nicole stood at the back of the aisle, wearing white. Not just white, a full wedding dress. Veil, lace, the whole thing. She looked like a distorted reflection of a bride, a mockery of everything the moment was supposed to be. Gasps rippled through the guests. I felt rage burn through me, sharp and immediate. "You need to leave," I said loudly. She ignored me, shouting about destiny, about love, about how I was making a mistake marrying Grace. Security moved in, but Nicole kept yelling about how Grace wasn't right for me, how I was throwing away our future. Grace didn't flinch. She turned to me, squeezed my hand, and said quietly, "Let's finish this." And just like that, I knew. Nicole was noise. Grace was home. Once Nicole was removed, the ceremony continued. We exchanged vows. We kissed. We walked down the aisle as wives. But even as we celebrated, I knew something terrifyingly clear. Nicole's desperation had crossed into obsession. And obsession doesn't fade quietly. It escalates. The moment Nicole was dragged out of the ceremony, the barn fell into a strange, suspended silence. For a heartbeat, no one moved. No one spoke. It was like the entire room was waiting to see if the world would snap back into place or crack open again. Grace squeezed my hand. "Dorothy," she whispered, her voice steady in a way mine wasn't. "I'm still here." That was all it took. I nodded, swallowed the lump in my throat, and turned back toward her. When we resumed our vows, my voice trembled at first, but then something unexpected happened. With every word I spoke, the fear loosened its grip. The chaos Nicole tried to unleash didn't get to define this moment. We kissed to applause that felt louder than any crowd I'd ever heard. People stood. Some cried. Some laughed in relief. And for a few precious minutes, it felt like we'd taken our power back. Later, we found out how Nicole got in. She'd bribed one of the catering staff, told them she was part of the bridal party who'd arrived late. The staff member didn't know the history. They were just trying to help. That detail haunted me more than the spectacle itself. Nicole hadn't acted on impulse. She'd planned. The reception somehow was joyful. Grace's calm set the tone. My best friend made a joke in his speech about how we'd already passed our first test as a married couple. Laughter broke the tension. Music filled the barn. For a while, we almost forgot. Almost. On our honeymoon, we decided to keep things simple. A quiet cabin by a lake in Tennessee. No Europe tour. No packed itinerary, just space to breathe after everything we'd endured. The first day was perfect. We kayaked on still water, ate dinner at a tiny diner where the waitress insisted we try the pie, and sat on the porch that night watching fireflies blink in the dark. I remember thinking, this is it. This is peace. The next morning, we went into town for coffee. It was one of those small cafes that felt like the heart of the place. Wooden tables, handwritten menus, locals greeting each other by name. Grace and I sat by the window, cups warming our hands, talking about nothing important. Then I felt it, that unmistakable sensation of being watched. I looked up. Nicole was standing in the doorway. She didn't hesitate, didn't pretend it was coincidence. She locked eyes with me and walked straight to our table like she owned the space. Grace froze beside me. I could feel her body tense. Nicole started crying immediately, loud, messy, desperate tears. She talked about missing me. About knowing I still loved her, about how this marriage was a mistake. I stood. "Nicole," I said firmly, "you need help." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You're the one making a mistake," she snapped. "Grace isn't right for you. I am." I didn't raise my voice. "This obsession isn't love," I said. "It's not healthy. I'm married. I love my wife. Nothing you say is going to change that." The cafe owner approached, her expression calm but authoritative. "Is there a problem here?" Nicole tried to wave her off. "This is private." The owner didn't budge. "This is my cafe, and you're making my customers uncomfortable. You can leave, or I can call the police." Nicole stormed out. My hands were shaking by the time Grace reached for them. That should have been the end. It wasn't. When we got home, the messages escalated. Accusations replaced apologies. Nicole sent fake screenshots, conversations that never happened, trying to make it look like I was cheating on Grace. She sent them directly to my wife with captions like, "You deserve to know the truth." Grace showed me every single one. We laughed at how poorly made they were, but the intent behind them wasn't funny. It was calculated. Malicious. Then Nicole went after my parents. She showed up at their house unannounced, sobbing, spinning a story about how Grace was controlling me. My parents shut her down immediately, but the fact that she'd crossed that line left me shaking with rage. The final straw came one afternoon when Grace left her yoga class. Nicole was waiting. Witnesses later said she came out of nowhere, screaming. Grace stayed calm, told her to back off, but Nicole lunged. She grabbed Grace's hair, yanked hard enough to nearly pull her down, then slapped her across the face. Someone called the police. When Grace called me, her voice was steady, but I could hear the shock underneath it. I drove straight to the station. Seeing the red mark on her cheek broke something open inside me. All the fear, all the patience, all the restraint evaporated. Nicole had crossed into violence. We pressed charges without hesitation. As the legal process began, one truth became painfully clear. Ignoring Nicole hadn't worked. Reasoning with her hadn't worked. Boundaries without consequences meant nothing to someone who believed she was entitled to my life. And as exhausted as I was, as shaken as Grace was, I knew this wasn't just about surviving Nicole anymore. It was about ending her access to us for good. The days after Nicole's arrest were unsettlingly quiet. No texts, no new accounts, no dramatic appearances. The silence felt unnatural, like the calm after a tornado, when you're not sure if it's truly over or just regrouping. Grace and I moved through those first few days slowly, carefully, like we were afraid to make too much noise and wake something up. We stayed close to home, took long walks, sat together on the couch without needing to talk. For the first time in months, my phone stayed silent. And then Nicole's parents called. I almost didn't answer. My chest tightened the moment I saw her mother's name on my screen, but something told me avoiding the call wouldn't bring peace. It would just delay whatever was coming. Her mother sounded exhausted. Not defensive, not angry, just worn down. She didn't excuse Nicole's behavior. She didn't deny it. She said things had been bad ever since Nicole left me for that man years ago. Apparently that relationship hadn't just ended. It had shattered her. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Hearing that explanation stirred complicated emotions. Sympathy tried to sneak in, but it didn't erase the damage Nicole had done. Trauma explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. Nicole's parents had been trying to get her into therapy for years. She'd refused. Now, with charges pending, they were hoping this would finally be the push she needed. Her mother asked if we would consider dropping the charges, only if Nicole committed to intensive therapy and stayed far away from us. Grace and I talked for hours. We weren't interested in revenge. We were interested in safety, peace, finality. So we agreed, but with conditions. Nicole had to enter therapy immediately and stay in it. She had to move out of state, far from us. And if she ever contacted us again, even once, we would go straight to the police. Her parents agreed without hesitation. Nicole moved to North Carolina to stay with extended family. Therapy began. Updates came through her parents, not her. And slowly life returned. Grace and I rebuilt our routines. We laughed again, without checking over our shoulders. We stopped bracing for impact. We reclaimed our sense of normal. Dropping the charges wasn't forgiveness. It was choosing our future over her chaos.